Okay, we're ready for the worksheet 4A for the Math 4 course. A little fun here at the beginning of the holidays. All right. Find the 6 values for angle A. So what we're going to have to do first with angle A is to figure out who is hypotenuse and opposite and that sort of thing. So if this is my angle that I am focusing on down here, then my opposite is going to be 5. There's my right angle, so my hypotenuse is going to be 13, and 12 gets to be the adjacent. Now, we'll spell out SOHCAHTOA here for handy reference. All right, sine is opposite over hypotenuse, which is going to be opposite 5 over hypotenuse 13. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, which is going to be 12 over 13. Tangent is opposite over adjacent, which is going to be 5 over 12. And that what we do is we just start flipping them. 5 over 12 becomes 12 over 5. 12 over 13 becomes 13 over 12. 5 over 13 becomes 13 over 5. And we just start flipping them for the last 3. So once you figure out the first 3, the next 3 should be fairly easy. Okay, let's try this again. From the perspective of angle A that is now up here, our opposite is down here, 15. There's the right angle, which means that 17 is the hypotenuse, and 8 must be the adjacent. Now, you have an advantage over me that every time I move the screen, I have to write this over again. But when you write it once on your paper, you can do an entire paper's worth of problems and not have to keep writing it over and over again. All right, so sine is opposite over hypotenuse. That's going to be 15 over 17. Cosine adjacent over hypotenuse is going to be 8 over 17. Tangent is opposite over adjacent, opposite 15 over adjacent 8. And then we just start flipping them. 15 over 8 becomes 8 over 15. 8 over 17 becomes 17 over 8. 15 over 17 becomes 17 over 15. Okay. Now we get to solve a bunch of problems that are SOHCAHTOA related. If I'm focusing on the 53-degree angle, that means that x is my opposite, 15 is my hypotenuse, and this is the adjacent. Now, my players are opposite and hypotenuse. So when I write SOHCAHTOA, I see that opposite and hypotenuse are these guys. So this is going to be a sine problem. I'm going to say sine of 53 degrees, opposite on top, hypotenuse on the bottom, x over 15. I'm going to multiply both sides by 15. And let's see, 1 decimal place is what we're supposed to be rounding this to. 15 sine 53 is 11.979. We'd actually round that up to 12.0. And yes, we do need the 0 because they said 1 decimal place. Okay. Let's try another one. There's the angle, which means that the opposite is over here. There's the right angle, so here's my hypotenuse, and this must be the adjacent. And we'll write SOHCAHTOA. And our players are hypotenuse and adjacent. Hypotenuse and adjacent tells me that this is going to be a cosine problem, cosine of 35 degrees. SOHCAHTOA tells me adjacent goes on top, 8 over x. Now, this is where I'm going to bring in a rule. I think I may have told you this before, but I'll repeat the description. And the idea is what I like to call switcheroo. Put simply, if I have x underneath the fraction like this, and I have something that represents some number on the left, I can switch places with those two. If I were to solve this by multiplying both sides by x, I'd have x on the left, and then I'd have to divide by cosine 35 to get x by itself. So, they're effectively trading places. This is just a shortcut. You would almost call it a theorem backed up with at least 2 steps of algebra. So, when the letter is on the bottom, you can switcheroo like that. Now, let's see what happens when I say 8 divide cosine 35. And that's going to give me 9.766. I'm going to call it 9.8. Rounded to 1 decimal place. Now for this one, I am going from this angle to that side as the opposite. This is the hypotenuse, which has nothing, and the adjacent is going to be the x. So player here, player there, adjacent and opposite. So when I write out SOHCAHTOA, I'm going to be looking for opposite and adjacent, which is going to be these two guys. So this tells me it's a tangent problem, tan of 40 degrees. SOHCAHTOA tells me opposite goes on top, 7 over x. And this is another one of those situations for switcheroo. I've got x on the bottom. I'm going to switch them out with the tan 40. Make sure, once you write tan 40, anything like that, sine of 20 or something like that, it's like those two are stuck together with crazy glue. If you move one, you got to move both of them. So what I don't want to see is I don't want to see tan x equals 7 over 40. That's going to get you wrong. If I write tan 40, then the 40 moves every time the tan moves. Okay. All right, so I get to my calculator and I say 7 divide tan 40 gives me 8.34. I'm going to round down to about 8.3 and leave it there. All right, here I am looking at an angle up top here that I'm going to come down this way for my opposite, which is nothing. This presumably is the right angle, which means that this would be the hypotenuse, and this would be the adjacent by default. So my two players are hypotenuse and adjacent. So I look on SOHCAHTOA and figure out who has hypotenuse and adjacent, and it would be yet and yet. So this is going to be a cosine problem. Cosine of 60 equals, SOHCAHTOA tells me adjacent on top, x over 13. This time I'm going to multiply both sides by 13 to get x by itself. And then when we go into the calculator, 13 cosine 60, and I get 6.5 exactly. So I no longer need that dot on the top. It is exactly 6.5. Remember, the dot over the equal sign means that I just rounded that thing. All right. Let's see how many more we got. Okay, we're down to the last two. Okay, so that opposite, hypotenuse across from the right angle, 10 gets to be the adjacent. Here's our SOHCAHTOA. Our players are opposite and adjacent, which would be those two. So this is a tangent problem, tan 35. SOHCAHTOA tells us opposite on top, x over 10. Multiply both sides by 10. and 10, 10, 35, 7.002. So you might as well just call it 7.0, but it is rounded. And the last one. This one from the perspective of the 40-degree angle, that is going to be our opposite. There's the right angle, so this is going to be the hypotenuse, and the adjacent is blank. There is SOHCAHTOA. Player is the hypotenuse, and the opposite, that would be these two, which means this is a sine problem, sine of 40 degrees. And then SOHCAHTOA tells us opposite on top, hypotenuse on the bottom, 9 over x. Since the letter is on the bottom, we're going to switcheroo. And then we go to the calculator. 9 divide sine 40. That gives me 14.0015, so I might as well just call it 14.0. Again, they want one decimal place, so we'll give them one. And I believe that is all of it for these problems. Next, we'll be getting into identities in the next issue, the next section.